Today, we are diving deep into one of the most painful and pivotal moments in American history, the Civil War. This is the story of how a nation literally tore itself apart and in the process was forced to redefine what it means to be a country.
But let's start with the big question, the one that hangs over everything. How does a country even get to that point? How does a nation declare war on itself? What has to go so wrong that brother is willing to fight brother? That's what we're going to explore.
You know, the Civil War wasn't some sudden explosion. It was more like a slow-burning fuse that had been lit decades earlier. It was a long, messy, and frankly ugly road that led to the first shots being fired.
Okay, so a huge part of the problem was this idea called popular sovereignty. Now, on paper, it sounds great, right? Let the people decide. But in practice, it was an absolute disaster. It basically created a mad dash for new territories, with both pro-slavery and anti-slavery settlers rushing in to try and win the vote. It wasn't democracy. It was a recipe for violence.
And wow, just look at how fast everything fell apart. This timeline is just staggering. In 1854, you get the Kansas-Nebraska Act, which sparks what becomes known as Bleeding Kansas. Then, boom, just 3 years later, the Supreme Court's Dred Scott decision basically says African Americans have no rights as citizens. And by 1859, you have John Brown's raid. In just 5 years, any hope of compromise was completely gone.
And nothing shows you that deep divide better than the reaction to John Brown. I mean, look at this. To people in the North, he was a hero, a martyr for the cause of freedom. But to the South, he was a terrorist, plain and simple. When one man can be seen in two such completely opposite ways, it tells you the country is no longer speaking the same language.
And really, all these events were just symptoms of a much bigger issue. The fact is, the United States wasn't really united at all. It was two fundamentally different societies trying to live under one roof. It was, as Lincoln said, a house divided.
And just look at the numbers. They really tell the story. The North had the people, the factories, and the railroads. I mean, 92% of all manufacturing, that's your entire war machine right there. The South's economy was built almost entirely on agriculture, specifically cotton exports. But you can't build cannons out of cotton. From day one, the Confederacy was at a massive disadvantage.
This economic split was fueled by a clash of core beliefs that just couldn't be bridged. For the North, the national government was supreme. For the South, it was all about states' rights. And we have to be really clear, the main right they were fighting to protect was the right of a state to continue and expand the institution of slavery. That was the unshakable conflict at the heart of it all.
So, the election of Abraham Lincoln in 1860 was the final trigger. The South saw him as a direct threat to their entire way of life. And just like that, the dominoes began to fall. South Carolina was first out the door. 6 more states followed in rapid succession. They formed their own nation, and when they fired on the U.S. fort, Fort Sumter, well, that was it. The time for talking was over.
Now, a war isn't just one long, continuous fight. It's a series of key moments, of turning points, where the entire momentum can shift on a dime. So let's take a look at the moments that really defined the outcome of the Civil War. The Battle of Antietam is hard to even comprehend. It was the single bloodiest day in American history. It wasn't really a decisive victory for the Union, but it was enough. They stopped General Robert E. Lee's invasion of the North, and that gave President Lincoln the political cover he needed to do something truly radical.
And that something was the Emancipation Proclamation. Now, it's really important to get what this did and what it didn't do. Notice the wording. It only freed slaves in the rebellious states. It was a powerful moral statement, for sure, but it was also a brilliant military strategy aimed squarely at crippling the Confederacy's economy and its ability to wage war.
And part of that strategy was about manpower. The proclamation officially opened the door for African American men to enlist in the Union Army, and they did. More than 150,000 joined the fight, providing a crucial surge of soldiers that the outnumbered South simply could not match.
But if you had to pick one moment where the war truly turned, it would be the summer of 1863. It was a devastating 1-2 punch. In the East, Lee's second invasion of the North was stopped cold at Gettysburg. At almost the exact same time, in the West, General Grant captured the city of Vicksburg. This gave the Union total control of the Mississippi River, literally slicing the Confederacy in two.
Of course, wars aren't just about battles and numbers. They're about the people in charge. The presidents and generals making life or death decisions under unimaginable pressure.
So you have these two leaders,
Abraham Lincoln, whose #1 goal was always to preserve the Union, but who evolved to see that ending slavery was essential to that goal. And then you have Jefferson Davis, an experienced military man, but he had the nearly impossible job of trying to lead a unified war effort for a country that was founded on the idea of not having a strong central government.
And on the battlefield, the Confederacy had arguably some of the most brilliant tactical generals ever, like Lee and Stonewall Jackson. They consistently won battles against larger armies. But the Union eventually found leaders in Ulysses S. Grant and William Sherman who understood a hard truth. This war wasn't going to be won by clever tactics alone. It had to be won by breaking the South's entire ability to fight.
As the war dragged on, and a Union victory started to look more and more certain, the very purpose of the war began to change. It was being redefined, not on the battlefield, but through the powerful words of Abraham Lincoln.
Think about the Gettysburg Address. It's so short, you can read it in 2 minutes. But in those few words, Lincoln transformed the meaning of the entire conflict. He said this wasn't just about putting the old Union back together. This was about giving the nation a new birth of freedom, making it a country that truly lived up to its founding ideals.
And then, as the war was ending, he delivered his second inaugural address. And it wasn't a victory lap. It was the opposite. It was a plea for grace and healing. With malice toward none, with charity for all. He was already thinking about the monumental task of putting a broken country back together again.
And that brings us to the final, lingering question. The war was won, the Union was preserved, but Lincoln's vision of a truly healed nation, well, that would be another struggle entirely. It leaves us with a question that America still wrestles with today. Once the shooting stops, how does a nation truly heal its divisions?